Here we go now, Hunch or Scientific, and really what I'm doing here is I'm just bringing in some ideas of, of firms that may have hunch or make scientific decisions, which is really hard to tell because we don't know, because we're not part of their decision-making process. But obviously by looking at business studies we can pick up a few of those things. I think the best way of answering that is that most firms will probably use a bit of both, but I'm going to give you examples of firms that have in fact used both, but maybe different things at different times. So let's start off over here with Richard Branson and Virgin. I reckon initially he probably had a hunch that if he gave first class travel on an aeroplane, that was going to work. So then he had to create that sort of environment. And now he's created this venture branded Capital House, and I can absolutely assure you that every single idea that they come across, they do loads and loads of market research within that particular area to come up to see whether or not that particular idea is a good or bad idea. So they do now use a scientific approach to decision making. However, you know, a lot of their original ideas are also based on feelings that maybe those will work. Tata JLR. Okay, Tata was very famously, when it first started, was into opium. That's how they made their money, but it's now owned by a great big charitable trust. Very interesting organisation. It's called a conglomerate because they get into all sorts of markets, etc. Now, I would guess that when they took over, I don't know, since selling any books, but I guess when they took over, that they did a lot of market research into whether or not they could take over Jaguar Land Rover and into whether or not they could sell that particular car in China. I think they had a pretty good plan. The whole way in which they managed that change process was very, very, very good. They didn't try and change things too much with the management. They liked their engineering expertise, their brand. So they probably gave it a great big corporate plan, which they then wrote, and they then delivered on that. So I'm sure they've done a lot of market research, although in some respects a pest analysis, the analysis would have been relatively straightforward. You know, that product in China will have a high income elasticity of demand. Incomes are growing very, very quickly in China, particularly maybe the sort of people who could buy the Range Rover Evoque. Let's sell them a Range Rover Evoque. RBS, Ambro on here. Right, this is an absolute classic case on here of the Royal Bank of Scotland and Ambro. Now, in the case of this situation on here, there is a lack of due diligence in terms of what happened. So their scientific process was actually really, really poor. I mean, their scientific process of how they run the business was really poor. They never actually realised that house prices could collapse, so therefore a lot of their loans could turn bad. So their whole mindset was based around this idea: we want to become a little Scottish bank, can become the biggest bank in the world, and it's very much about the power of that particular individual. So in terms of their scientific decision making, it was not particularly good, I would suspect. Right, the Body Shop. I think originally the idea was just based around, and each one came up with this idea. Yes, I think this is a great idea. Corporate social responsibility is a good idea. Let's produce a firm that is all about public good and not private greed. Brilliant, well done, Anita. Apple. I think Apple initially was based on Steve Jobs and a hunch that, as I said before in the story, when he went to university, he attended a lecture, and it was about calligraphy, wasn't it? And therefore, if you have a situation or where they produce something that's really beautiful, then people would like that. And then you have the idea of making it really small. So I think he had a hunch about all those things. But I suspect right now, a lot of that will be based on scientific information about the products, about what people want, and now obviously they brought out the iWatch, $350 or whatever, or the top one is $17,000 on there. Cobra, definitely originally, he just had a feeling that there was a gap for a premium lager, beer, lager, when you sat down and had your Indian meal. Although they did make mistakes upon route, obviously. Kia, Daihatsu, Aldi, Ryanair, essentially they've all brought out different business models. We were speaking about Daihatsu, who have changed the old supplier model, the old lean production model, based around more the idea of market mechanism, trying to get the parts at the cheapest possible price, still keeping the quality high, and therefore they'll be able to grow in the markets because their cars are significantly cheaper than the opposition. But basically I would say probably all the big firms do base a lot of their decision making on scientific management, partly because they have the power to do that. But occasionally you might just have a feeling about something that this may work, and clearly the big markets in the world right now are the emerging markets. So if you're going to move into the emerging markets, you've got to think very carefully about how you're going to do that. So in short, the answer is, I've got a lot of examples there of firms that we've used. In short, the answer is yes, you should use both. Thank you very much.